this morning, and we always start out with these every we have a webinar. And so first we would just like to know which partner do you best represent? So if you could take a couple seconds and answer this poll for us. Okay, so I will share the results so we can all see where we're joining from today. So we have a lot of Title I partners with us today, as well as other WIOA partners and stakeholders, and then some from across the board. So we want to welcome you this morning. Thank you for taking time out of your workday and learning from Todd with us this morning. We are excited to learn from him and learn with you. And so next we would like to know where your local area is. And so we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to answer this poll. Okay, and so I will share the results. It looks like we have a good range across the board. Most of us are joining from Central Illinois today, which is where our center is located in Bloomington, Illinois. So we always like to see that, our fellow Central Illinoisans. And then we have quite a few from Northern and Chicago as well. So welcome everyone this morning. Thank you again for taking time out of your day. Thank you, Todd, for presenting to us. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Todd.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I want to thank the Illinois Center for special program support at ISU, as well as Kirsten. We appreciate having this platform every week. I think it's a valuable resource for us to move forward and to educate each other and talk to each other. So thank you. My name is Todd Lowry. I'm the Business Service Manager for the Illinois Department of Employment Security. My information is here, and it'll be repeated again when we get to the question section. Okay, so according to WIOA Section 108, business service teams are intended to promote, market, and connect initiatives that give businesses and job seekers access to the full spectrum of workforce program services offered by the combined collective of identified 4 core agencies. I think if you take this statement, you start to look into it, it is all-inclusive statement. I think it captures well what we do, what we intend to do, and what we're directed to do. We have to ask ourselves, how do we promote, how do we market, how do we connect to businesses, how do we inform them about workforce programs that best meet their needs? And each local area provides a different dynamic in doing this. Each local area is set up differently. They have different employers. They have different economic contributors to their local areas. But we all work from a similar script. Today we're going to be talking about business engagement briefly during COVID-19. We could spend some time talking on a separate webinar at some point about and get granular in the different virtual platforms that can be used. Today we're using several in discussing, how that we go about our business, how do we connect to businesses in this different environment, in this changed environment. So those virtual tools will be discussed. How are we partnering these days with our workforce providers? Are we talking? Are we having those conversations? Are meetings regularly scheduled? Those kind of questions we need to be asking ourselves. And then we'll talk a little bit about best practices. And by the way, if you notice, during this time we had to let our graphics department go, so I do my own graphics, and as you can see, I really don't need a graphics department when you see that artistry I created there. Next slide. For business engagement processes, one statement overriding through WIOA. Through WIOA, the local governance requires and empowers chief elected officials, businesses, program partners, and others to optimize, leverage, and allocate resources to respond to the needs of local employers, workers, and job seekers through targeted sector strategies. Increased employer engagement and accelerated work-based learning training programs that create career pathways. That is a mouthful. So if we break that down just a little bit, when we talk about business by industry, by size, by designation, we identify those businesses, and we actually have different approaches in engaging with them. When we make or create our connections to businesses, we each have our own processes. However, if we're working together, we have a process that is transparent and a process that doesn't, hopefully, overlap efforts that we've done in the past. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how that's worked for us and how we've engaged with our partners. But I think a question I'd like to just lay out there for those participating today to ask themselves is, you know, how do you gauge your business service team? Is your business service team effective? Is your business service team meeting regularly? Are you communicating? And those sort of questions. And we'll talk more about that as we go through. I think one of the important things that we want to stress that has changed for us under WIOA is the conversations that we have with employers. The employer engagements that we now strive to have as a needs conversation. When I say needs conversation, I mean we know we're equipped when we go in and speak with an employer. We've prepared, and we'll talk a little bit about that preparation here today. But are we listening? The employer might have one very specific need that they want addressed. Are we addressing that first and foremost? And if we're listening to the conversation, we ought to be able to come up with the options and workforce solutions that would best meet that employer's needs. So what's available, applicable, implementable, those type of questions that we're going to ask. We have to keep in mind those programs and services that we're required to administer, accelerated work-based learning programs, internships, apprenticeships, dislocated worker program opportunities, those sort of things. And we'll get a little bit into some of that as we go along. Next. So some of the straight up topics, the top of the heap topics that we want to stress when we're engaging with our own business service teams internally, we want to have those partner conversations. You know, what kind of relationship does the partner have with the business that you wish to outreach to? And sometimes these businesses come to us from different directions and for different reasons. A lot of times for us at IDES, the business is coming to us because they need to hire somebody in their workforce. And many times they need to hire somebody yesterday. So we have to be prepared for that, and we have to prepare them for processes that might not be as expedient as they wish them to be in getting those folks hired. Let's say a company, and we work with a lot of federal contractors, so let's say a federal contractor has to fill 40 very specialized positions, and they have to fill them fairly quickly. Our initial conversation with that employer is going to be related to a time factor. How are we going to get that many folks notified? How are we going to identify those particular skill sets that the employer is seeking to hire from? And we do that in several ways. And we're going to talk, again, moving forward, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways we can effectively prepare for that conversation. But it all begins with a partner conversation. And we need to understand, you know, what type of relationship does that partner previously have with that employer, and are we stepping on some toes here when we go talk to the employer, or are we well informed from our partner as to specific aspects of that employer that we should be aware of? programs that they've already initiated in the past so that we don't have to be redundant in repeating those conversations. So part of that, once we've had that conversation and we have identified the employers that we're going to, and when I say we, business service team being the we, and when we've identified the employer that we're going to outreach to, one of the best things we can do to prepare is to do our research. So when we do our research, we're going to talk about the different ways that we can, become detectives in a sense, that we can look at that employer from a different lens. We can look at that employer from a comparative lens, as in, what are the employer competitors paying for these same positions in their area. And IDES has some wonderful labor market information on our website, and you can go in there and you can start looking up things like like employment statistics. What's the UI rate for that area? What's the available labor market specifically for a skill set? We can tell what jobs have been posted in that area and the numbers of those jobs. Like, let's say we're looking at trade, transportation, utilities. We know how many jobs have been posted in that area in a specific month. Usually that's a month lag for that information to get on our website. Government jobs, professional and business services, and retail trade, all of that. We need to document employer contacts, and the document process should be consistent for your area, at least understood. You should be able to, as a business service team, know what your partners or when your partners have contacted an employer and what process took place with that employer, or what initiatives or workforce programs were engaged with. So documentation is really important to us. One of the ways that, and I'm going to go backwards here just a half step. One of the ways that we conduct our employer research is to go on their website. Let's see what they do. Let's see what they've done. What do they produce? What's their mission? Because understanding an employer is a big step towards meeting the employer's needs and getting the employer to want to work with you, to cooperate with you, to open themselves up. Now, in the virtual world, we don't have the options that we had available to us just previously. I wrote this down, and I don't have that number, but we did over 8,000 in-person visits with employers in 2019. Since March 16th of this year, we've done 0. That completely changes what we do and how we do it. So we've had to prepare for this. So some of the steps that we've taken, beyond the partner discussions and beyond the exploration of the employer worksite, is to also look at what they have systematically. And I say systematically, if you're using Illinois JobLink, for instance, how many job orders do they have in the system? Can we put a job order in the system where none exist? Career Connect for those folks in the Chicago area. You have these systems, you have that availability, you know what's been done. And when we engage with employers, one of the things that I had struggled with, and I'm going to go back to 2006. So when I first started in this area of creating a business service team, I was contacted initially by Bennett Krause, my old boss, and he contacted me and said, look, we want to put together a business service team for the Illinois Department of Employment Security. And he had, he'd done his own research. I was working at a local office, and he had sent somebody even over to interview me, not for the job, but just to find out what I was doing in our local area to engage with employers. We were successfully doing so. We had some pretty good hiring numbers that went right through our workforce area. One of the things that we had done when we started this, or that I'd done even prior to 2006, was I had got there. They said, hey, do you want to do unemployment? And I said, yeah, sure, whatever. And I got into doing unemployment and entering claims, and I did that for about a week. I said, are there any other jobs you need done here? So business services was wide open and available at that time, or engagement with business. We didn't call it business services. So that's what I did. I started meeting with businesses. We started connecting businesses to IDES programs. And then it occurred to me that I had some workforce partners, our local workforce area, 21 partners, that had programs and services. And my conversations with employers, I started to realize that they could benefit from some of these services. Long story short, what it came down to was that my boss, the manager at the time, had told me that, really we don't work with our partners. What we discuss and what we do is completely separate from what they discuss and what they do. So now flash forward, because I've got this brainstorm at this time that, we really need to engage those services and programs of our partners so that when we go talk to an employer, we're delivering a collective that's going to better meet and better serve that employer in that area. And I started talking to our partners, and we started working together. And that's why Bennett Krause had finally come to me and said, hey, let's design a business service team that kind of fits that model. And then lo and behold, 8 years later, President Barack Obama signed into the act for WIOA. And WIOA kind of validated what we were already doing, and we didn't really have to adjust our mechanisms much, our processes much, to meet WIOA, and we were thrilled to do so. And I know that when you talk to employers, and a lot of times employers are very, very busy. I had worked with an employer once where I called her. I got the impression that she didn't have time for me or anybody else, and she actually picked up the phone on the floor. She worked at a nursing home, and she picked up the phone in the hallway somewhere to talk to me. I learned from that point forward, well, for this particular employer, you better prepare a 30-second speech, and you better have it ready to go. So, did my employer prep work, found out if they had job orders, checked on the wages, had all those questions, and fired those off in 30 seconds or less to her. Every month we had that conversation. About 6 months into this, she picked up the phone. We were talking. She said, Todd, before you get off, I have to ask you one question. She goes, why are you rushing these phone calls? Why are you getting off the phone so quickly? So you learn a lot from these engagements. And, relating this back to what we're doing now in the virtual world, your cues are not there that you used to have when you engage with business. Some of those cues would be visual, of course. And when you go in and meet with an employer, the first thing that we're training our staff to do is we want to connect with that employer some way, shape, or fashion. We want that employer to look at us as a partner in moving forward. And in doing so, a lot of times, you want the employer to like you. If the employer likes you and they begin to trust you and your conversations get deeper and the concerns the employer have within their own facility, within their own working environment, they start to get expressed. You're going to know more. You're going to have more information in which to satisfy those employer needs. So we make that connection through, visual. A lot of times you walk in the office and you look around and you see the pictures on the wall, you see where he went to school, you see that he's got a wife and he's got twins. Those sort of things can be very connective in the conversation. It doesn't always have to be strictly business, and employers are not always in such a rush that, here's your hat, what's your hurry, is what they're telling you. Next. So I posted this Ikea job interview because I thought it was appropriate for this presentation. This is kind of a way to identify, okay, this employer wants to get right down to business with their job interviews. The guy walks in the door and he's got to put his own chair together. Having that conversation with the employer I just discussed, so I won't go into too much additional detail. I will say that now, because of COVID, because of staff working from home, and by the way, all my staff, that's the Veterans Outreach staff and 5 managers, they all work from home, and they all are having these conversations with employers over the phone, or they're emailing back and forth. This creates a limit to what we can do, but it doesn't mean that we had to stop our progress. We were stalled in our progress for quite some time, and then we met up with our partners and started accessing other sites, such as WorkNet has just been a wonderful partner in engaging with employers, setting them up in employer booths for job fairs. Employers have an opportunity and a platform to be on a panel and discuss with potential employees what their expectations are in working in that environment. Which is wonderful, because in the past, when we visited employers, when we had that ability to do so, we've been able to walk through a business. We've been able to see what they do. We've physically gone there, and we can kind of prepare those clients that we're working for that job. We can tell them that, it's a bit hot in there. Be prepared. You're going to wear a hard hat. You're going to have boots. We can be told all that, but experiencing it is much different. So that comes into the hiring needs and the capability. So we're having those conversations. Businesses really need to work with the workforce programs if they're ever going to get an advantage over basically the competition. Our programs offer them the ability to affect their bottom line. What does it cost for an employer to train an employee, especially an employee they're paying $15 an hour or $20 an hour? If they've got to spend weeks training somebody, that adds up considerably. And where we can step in and assist them with whatever programs or services that we can provide that alleviate some of that financial stress, good for us. The enhancement of student employability through the opportunity to gain industry and work-relevant skills, experience, and knowledge, that's key to this, right? Because as the Department of Education, Department of Labor got together and wrote this, and they didn't write it, just because they didn't have anything to do on a Saturday. They wrote it because they saw an overriding need. So, next. We document our engagements so that, and I spoke a little bit of this earlier, we document our engagements so that we have left some breadcrumbs for those that follow. We document our engagements to remind ourselves, what did we discuss with that employer? What was proposed for that employer? What did that employer initiate as a result of our conversation? And again, we meet with our partners to find those solutions. We can effectively deliver the best solution to that employer when we have the full spectrum of services and programs available to us. And then the follow-up. On our system, we require that if we have reached out and contacted an employer by whatever means, whether it be email, phone, fax, or in-person visit, we tag that with a 30-day reminder. Earlier, if 2 weeks is appropriate, then we have a 2-week reminder. But we always follow up with the employer. The employer doesn't want to be left with the impression that we were one and done, that that was the last conversation we're going to have. So documentation, meeting with partners, and following up are 3 overriding principles that we want to stick to. Next. Our virtual meetings can come on several different platforms, and one of the things that we ran across early on was technology issues, as I'm sure others have. So these different virtual platforms could include, for us, it's WebEx. That's our primary webinar platform or meeting platform. But there's Zoom, there's Microsoft Teams, there's GoToMeeting. And, for myself, I'm on a lot of committees, and a lot of these committees are private-public partnership members. So each one has a different platform. So you've kind of got to be ready for that as well, and you have to download that software for that platform and be prepared. Some of our older computers and laptops, they're not equipped for this. So we had a lot of technical issues that we needed to address. And obviously with Illinois Department of Employment Security, our primary was to get the unemployment insurance taken care of, get people paid, get them paid timely and correctly. That was our primary focus, and it had to be our primary focus. If the dam breaks, you've got to get the people in the village out of the way of the water, right? That's first and foremost. But unemployment's not a destination, but a workforce, a career, a job in which they can feed their families, that is. So eventually we have to get there to that. Workshops, again, we use the similar programs for workshops. We can use the WebEx, but then you got to remember that the people that are going to be participating in your workshops have to have the ability to join them. So there's some preliminary work to do. If you need to survey participants, if you need to discuss with them, what works best by these polls, those conversations need to happen. And then hiring events. I mentioned before that we work wonderfully with our WorkNet partners and our SIU contractors that support the platform for virtual job fairs. These virtual job fairs have been a godsend for us because we really didn't have anything set up internally to do so. So in working with partnership with them, and I suggest everybody reach out that wants to have a hiring event of any kind, start with your business service team would be a really great start, and somebody on your business service team is going to have the process. We need to cross-train each other, we need to discuss the process, and we need to be effective when we do it. Practice, practice, practice. But these events last week is a perfect example. Typically at IDES, we have the Veterans Program. So typically at IDES, we do a Veterans Week of hiring events, and we've done it in several different ways. We've had hiring events throughout the state in all the different regions. For us, it was 6 regions at the time. We have the 10 economic development regions now, but we used to do the hiring events. Of course, they were in-person events. We would be supported by hosts that would help us with those hiring events. But this last week, we were able to do these virtually. And for the 5 days, and Veterans Day was Wednesday of last week, for the other 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday, we were able to have virtual hiring events. And believe me, it was a process, and there was a lot of activity that had to be performed behind the scenes to make it happen, but it did happen, and we feel like we had a footprint in Veterans Day activities for the entire week. Next, go ahead. So given the premise of Executive Order 2019-03 and its support of Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the Executive Order 03 came out, I believe, in January of 2019, and what it stated, was that right? 2017, sorry. And what it stated was that the workforce areas had to create a goal agenda, basically, to meet the economic needs of Illinois. And in doing so, it was engaging our workforce programs, and it was making sure that we were connecting successfully, and it involved basically the 3 C's of working with our partners. So communication, collaboration, cooperation. Those things were extremely important in connecting with our employers and assisting with the economics of Illinois and making sure that we were delivering on our promises to be the best at workforce provisions. There's an integrated business service plan, collaborative identification of key regional industry sectors, so each area has that identification through their regional plans. And then they develop strategies based on identifying those regional sectors and approaching those businesses and best serving them. The organizational structure is very important because you have to understand, and we all have to understand, exactly how we're comprised in that construction, in that structure of how we deliver our solutions. How do we manage our business intelligence? Because we know a lot. We have a lot of data to back up what we do and what we want to do moving forward. Again, I spoke briefly of the labor market information that we have on our website. When we can go in and look at trends, projections, we can look at and see how the labor market supports specific industry sectors. Are those people available? If they're not available, what can we do to develop career pathways and talent pipelines to fill those needs? And then accountability and performance. For business outreach, the performance measures and the effectiveness in serving employers is two things. First of all, we want to make sure that the employee is retained, and how long are they retained. So did we effectively either train or just refer a qualified candidate to an employer? And we're going to look at that and see where they're at in the second quarter at the end. Where are they at in the fourth quarter? Are they still with that employer? And then what was the wage that was paid on that? And what was it a living wage? The other effectiveness in serving employer measure is penetration. How many employers did we actually connect with and provide services to? There's been some debate on exactly, what qualifies for that. WIOA has not been real clear on exactly what qualifies as an engagement, but we know for sure that anytime we engage with an employer and we're providing them with either, let's say, labor market information, as I mentioned before, or we're providing them with a hiring plan, or they're participating with us in a job fair or virtual hiring event. Maybe we've got them to start filling out fill out WOTC applications for tax credits, work opportunity tax credits. We have 9 categories in which somebody might qualify there. That's an IDES product, but there are products in the apprenticeship and on-the-job learning, dislocated work. All these programs that, and I mentioned several of them today, all these programs are applicable to, getting a click, getting a check mark in that area of penetration. Are we going to get 50% penetration in Illinois? Not likely. And that's because we have 350,000 employers, a little less than that, in Illinois. And you're not going to connect with single sole employers, those mom and pops. A lot of times you're not going to make that connection because our programs really aren't applicable to those folks. You're not going to connect with the Avon lady and others. So, but you are going to connect with you have an opportunity to connect with well over 100,000 employers, and our penetration rate last year was somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.5%, which is pretty good considering that mass, huge number of employers that are in Illinois. Okay, next. I think that's it. So that's my contact information. If there's any questions that you have, I'm sure I missed a lot of what you may have in way of concerns in business service teams and working together. So if we can go to the questions, this would be a good time to do so.
Okay, great. Thank you, Todd. We did have some questions that have come through. And so Diana would like to know, when you quoted the number of employer engagements at the beginning of your presentation, what source was used?
Okay, for us, when I was quoting a number for IDES engagements, so our source was Illinois Job Link.
Okay,
Illinois Job Link is the source for a lot of our federal reporting.
okay, great. Thank you for answering that question. And then, do you have any recommendations on how to increase attendance for virtual hiring events? We have struggled to get job seekers to attend.
You know, I think this is a great question. I love it because this is exactly what I discussed with my team. As a matter of fact, I discussed it just yesterday. We didn't have as big a numbers as we thought we should for the Veterans Day activities, Veterans Week activities last week. And I think this is something that should be brought up locally with the business service teams. Now, overriding those things statewide that are available, you can come to us and you can reach out to me and I'll connect you, to the right people. But we can do email blasts. If we can look up those folks that have recently, not recently, in the past as well, that have registered with Illinois Job Link, and everybody that receives unemployment basically is registered in Illinois Job Link, and we can send out mass emails to those folks, inviting them. I think it's important to target those, that have the skill sets specific to what you're looking for the hiring event. So that mass emails, we can do as many as you like. If you got 50,000 people you want us to email, we'll email 50,000 people. Now, we have some limitations on our phone notification system, and we can do that as well, and we can be a lot more targeted on that. So we can look at the list, we can look for the skill sets you're looking for or the qualifications you're looking for, and we can actually, you prepare a message, we will record it, and our voice will go to those folks, inviting them to your event. Outside of that, I think there needs to be a lot more development and improvements on our social media websites, those side of things, because we have to go where they are. I think that's the important thing. So where are they? Figure that out, and I think you'll have your solution.
Great, thank you. And then a couple more questions. Eileen would like to know, many employers, when asked that question, have no idea of their cost. Do you have a template or worksheet you use to help them figure that out?
Okay, I'm not sure what cost we're talking about. So I do not have a template or a worksheet for cost, because all of the services and solutions that we provide from our end do not have a cost associated with it. So if there is an employer workforce partnership in which costs are incurred by the employer, I'm not aware of what that is.
Okay, Eileen, maybe she could clarify a little bit, or maybe you could clarify a little bit for us in the chat, and we'll get back to you if that didn't answer your question. And then another question for you, Todd. How did you engage with those employers, and how do you decide who to reach out to? And then also, how can you direct your response during this time of COVID? So multiple questions. So first, how did you engage with those employers, and how do you decide who to reach out to?
Okay, well, many times we're kind of reactive in that measure, because employers are reaching out to us because they're looking for employees. Other times when we're looking at our sector direction, we've identified in our regional plans those sectors. So most regions have manufacturing, transportation, distribution, logistics, healthcare, and IT. They have 3 of those 4, just about every regional plan in the state, so all 10 of those. And they're going to identify, and again, using IDES information to do so. So that's how we should be, honestly, selecting our targets, but we should also be looking at, because it's an ever-changing economic environment, especially since COVID. So maybe some of those areas are no longer producing that demand that we once had. So then we can look at another thing. Who posted, and we have this on the IDES website, you can go in and look and see who posted, and when I say who, what sector, what industry, posted the most jobs in your area. That's a pretty good indicator that there's a target. But there are several ways to identify that. Those are just a couple.
Okay, great. Thank you, Todd. And then his second question is how can you also direct your response during this time of COVID? I'm not sure if did you address that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Repeat that.
Specifically, he wants to know how can you direct your response during this time of COVID to those employers?
Okay, well, I think obviously we have to take all the precautions that are necessary in this time of COVID. So we're not physically interacting at all with the employer at this point in time. And of course that creates a lot of issue because as I spoke of before, if we're not, and now I'm looking at it not from an IDES lens, but from a local workforce area lens where they really need to engage with the employer to figure out all these things like costs and you know, what's it going to take to equip somebody to go to work for them and what's the environment like and all those things. So for my staff, of course, we're just not allowed to engage in the physical sense, and we have to have phone conversations and emails and whatever, but nothing in relationship to a physical appearance at the employer's doorstep. It's not happening.
Okay. And then Tom Windorf, which is the head of the Business Engagement Committee for our IWIB, he wanted to kind of make a statement, and he isn't able to send it in the chat to everyone. So I'm going to read his statement for all of you. He went ahead and said, business engagement is about building a relationship with the employers. This starts with a conversation and listening to discuss main points. The next step is to establish trust and credibility with that employer, and this evolves into a working relationship that leads to full partnership between the business and workforce system. It is important for the same person to be building this relationship. A lead person should be identified by the workforce partners who will be responsible for communication and building that relationship. That is why integration and communication between the workforce partners business services group is so important. Businesses want a single point of contact. They don't really care what agency you work for. They just want you to figure out how to match your services to their need. And so, to their need. And so we thank you for that, that comment into the Q&A, Tom, and for that advice. We appreciate that. We have a couple more questions for you, Todd, and Tom can feel free to jump in as well. Wilson would like to know, would anyone know where I can obtain data of women and minority-owned businesses in Illinois and or by the county level?
Yeah, so if you would send me an email, you've got my email right there on the screen. I will connect you to our Economic Information and Analysis group, and they can certainly, if not provide you the answer themselves, which I suspect they would, they can connect you to where you can get that information, and hopefully that will be fairly quickly.
Great, thank you so much, Todd. And then a follow-up from Eileen, who previously asked about the cost and if you had a template. She said she was referring to when you spoke about the costs that employers incur when hiring and training new employees, the cost of high turnover, etc. If they pay a new hire $15 and then spend 3 months of training, what are the actual costs over and above the new hire's salary? So I guess she was referring to if you had a template for that.
I do not, but I'm telling you what, that is a wonderful, I would take that more as a suggestion than a question, because I really think that would be a great tool to have, and and I think we have employers out there that would engage with us in that respect, and we would be able to maybe create a template based on those costs. Obviously, it's going to be vastly different between one employer and the next, but I can think of several employers right offhand about those conversations I've had with them and what it costs them to equip somebody and train somebody. You know, it's not only that equipment, it's not only that time that you're paying that person to produce absolutely nothing for you. It is paying that person who's training them as well, who's probably making much more than $15 an hour. So I love that question. I think that's something we should explore. I guess I didn't give an answer, did I?
No, no. I think that's a great suggestion, Eileen, and that's a great resource that definitely I think would be valuable to the system. And so I agree with Todd on that, and maybe we can kind of take that suggestion and run with it. Perfect.
And if I could just interject here, if you had that created and you had that template and you could do a side-by-side comparison to what, you know, engaging with workforce would save that employer, you know what, money talks, right? And what's out in your field walks. So I really, yeah, I'm going to write that down.
Awesome. Well, great suggestions. That's what this is all about, right? Okay, so then we did have a follow-up question from Sherry. She previously, I'm not sure if you previously asked a question, Sherry, but oh, she wanted to know, because you were stating how in this time of COVID, it's not typically affecting your interaction with the employers because you're not interacting with them in person regardless of the times. And so she would like to kind of elaborate on that, because she asks, wouldn't you be meeting by Zoom or Skype or email or phone? Are you using teleconferencing to meet with employers?
Okay. No. We're actually meeting with our employers one-on-one, so it's pick up the phone and have a conversation and do the best you can to address those needs in that fashion. Information that the employer provides us that's pertinent to the whatever situation we're dealing with is usually provided by email. And until we get into, again, engaging with employer groups, I think that's going to change the dynamic a bit. But I do like the idea of Skype. However, the laptops that my folks currently have are about 15 years old, and we are, you know, we're not able to get the resources yet, but we're working on that.
Okay, great. And then Eileen would like to comment and thank you for being so ecstatic about her suggestions. She said many companies just don't know and haven't thought about it, haven't thought about having that template. And so they try to do breakdowns for them, but smaller employees just don't have that data or don't really have time to try to figure it out. So if you wanted to add that feedback, Todd, to kind of that suggestion for that template.
Yeah, and can I just say on that, you know, that's been running through some corridors in my mind because honestly, I hadn't heard that before. Now, then again, you got to understand that business engagement for IDES does not go into the granular of those type of costs because that's a different workforce provider that has programs that would have a need for that. However, you know, as we've talked throughout this particular webinar, this is a partnership now. This is a collaborative now. This is not individual agencies going out and trying to sell their product. And I say sell because that's what we are, right? We're salespeople. When we go to speak with employers, and that's why I mentioned, you know, they need to like you. If they're going to buy your product, they need to like you. And how are they going to like you? Well, you know what? You come up with solutions like that. You come up with comparative analysis that, you know, strike their fancy. You know, move with that and make that happen. So I just, you know, I'm on a lot of committees, so I think that's one that's we're definitely going to look at. I think this professional development committee you and I are on, Kirsten, is probably a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Tom kind of had some feedback about that suggestion as well. And so he says for employers that does not know their training cost, or most employers do not know their training costs in any given region. There are probably employers that have figured out what training costs might be. Keeping confidentiality, this information can be shared to give an employer with no idea on the cost, what possible costs might be, and how to determine. You must keep your ear to the ground to collect that kind of information. So we appreciate that feedback, Tom. And then another question for you, Todd. Cleopatra would like to know, do you have a list of background-friendly employers along with their contact information that you could share out?
You know what? I do not have a list from a statewide perspective. I do, and no, I can't share a statewide list of employers. However, I'm not being stubborn here. It is each business service team should be able to come together, and yes, we have that list, and we can go over any and all employers on that list in a specific geographical area. And it should be. Those discussions should be taking place.
Okay, great. Sherry White said that business services are using very old computers, but we need to simply open Zoom or download another telecommunication source. This is the future and no one is turning back. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit. So if you are interested in, training or professional development on those telecommunication sources, please feel free to take that survey that I posted in the chat and note that as potential professional development that you would love to attend. And our professional development committee would love to come up with that for you. There are also a ton of free resources as well on zoom.com, just using Google. And there's other platforms that have been mentioned during this, like Skype. I know our center, we use Zoom as well as we use GoToWebinar and GoToMeeting. So it is kind of tricky to keep all the different settings and keep all the different platforms kind of separate in your mind because there are so many, and there's probably only going to be more that are coming out as we're moving forward, in this pandemic and in this unprecedented work environment. But if you would like some more professional development on telecommunication, please take that survey and note that there's a question that asks, what would you like to see in professional development? So you can definitely put that in that option for our committee to kind of ponder and help us provide future professional development. So thank you everyone for the Q&A. This is great. This is a great discussion. There is a new job site that shows jobs with background-friendly employers called Honest Jobs, and Eileen put that in the chat to us as panelists. So Eileen, thank you. I will put that in the chat to everyone. Is there anyone else that has any more questions or any more comments or feedback? Todd, did you have any final thoughts? I don't see any other questions coming through.
No, my final thoughts are that I had a blast. I didn't have a blast doing the presentation because, typically when I do presentations, I do it to a group of people that I can see. Where what was fun for me on this, and by the way, that's part of my requirements for staying here and not retiring, is I got to have fun every day. I got to laugh. But part of the fun for me was this discussion, because the amount of questions that were asked, the way the questions were asked, and the professional demeanor of those folks asking them tells me that we are well along and well on our way in being that collective that we've spoke of. And I just want to thank everybody that participated today, because that means a lot to me, that many questions were asked and people are that engaged. And I want to thank everybody.
Yes, thank you so much to everyone who has um, participated in this discussion. This has been one of the best discussions that I've had on a webinar. So that has been great and has been so integrative. I think that that is how we learn best. And I attest to that as well with you, Todd. Um, and so Tom Windorf would also like to say thank you for your hard work and service to our committees. Thank you, everyone. As a member of IWIB and the DuPage Workforce Board, he wants to reiterate how appreciative he is of our great system, and he's very hopeful that we are continuing to create that great system with everyone's help, including Todd, including everyone from our center, and including all of you listening today at your own systems. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today, taking time out of your busy morning. We'll give you back some time here as we're ending right at 11 a.m. This was an amazing discussion. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we end today. This webinar was recorded as well as the discussion, so all of the resources and everything, and that will be posted on our center's website as well as the Illinois Workforce website within 48 hours, and you will also receive a follow-up email tomorrow morning with the survey in it. And then I've also posted the survey in the chat. If you want to go ahead and take it right away with your feedback, we would greatly appreciate it. And again, you can access that recording and the slides from today on our website, as well as the Illinois WorkNet website as well. And so with that, I just want to thank everyone. Thank you so much for presenting to us today, Todd, and have a great day, everyone.